Why Procedamus? I remember the day after my ordination, the morning of my first Mass, vesting in the sacristy, putting on the amice, putting on the alb, the cincture, the maniple, the stole, the vestments. I remember the 10 years that I had been preparing for this moment. Aside from the emotions and the nerves, I was aware of what offering the holy sacrifice of the Mass means for myself and for all the faithful. But additionally, given the context of the current persecution of the traditional Catholic faith in the world and in the church. I grabbed my chalice, I grabbed my beretta, looked at the crucifix, bowed, and said, Procedamus in pacem, to which the altar servers replied, In nomine Christi, Amen. I put on my beretta, and we processed out to the altar to offer the holy sacrifice of the Mass, the traditional Latin Mass, the Mass of the ages. Ascending the steps of the altar, I felt only gratitude to our Lord for having allowed me to be an instrument in preserving that which is true, good, and beautiful for future generations, for the ages to come. As long as I'm physically able, this Mass will continue to be offered. This spirit of determination, this spirit of perseverance, is that to which I would love to invite all of you to share. The first annual Procedamus Gala is organized to support the mission of the Oblates of St. Augustine and the old Roman Catholic See of Caer-Glow to preserve the traditional Latin Mass and the traditional Catholic faith for future generations. Procedamus.
Hello, and welcome to one more episode of this series as Father Martin and I are going through The Restoration of Christian Culture by John Sr., this book right here. How are you, Father?
Doing well, Alberto. How are you?
Doing great. Excited for the Procedamus 2026 Gala in Clearwater Beach, Florida. Buck Hall will be joining us as the Master of Ceremonies. Father Cabin Robinson will be joining us as the keynote speaker. Father Martin, you will be there. Bishop Miko will be there. I will be there. Mrs. Flatcat will be there. It'll be a lot of fun. The Procedamus 2026 Gala is in benefit of the old Roman Catholic See of Caer-Glow and the Oblates of St. Augustine. So you're working hard on the Gala, Father. Lots of stuff going on. A lot of updates that you'll eventually be able to share with people. But
Absolutely.
yep. So our episode today, a final solution to liberal education. And this is focused, of course, in the universities, and then John Sr. eventually gets into a criticism, basically, of those institutions that prepare us for university. Now, he referred, which we were talking right before going live, Father John Sr. talks a lot about John Henry Newman all throughout the book. He references him a lot. So Newman has this. It's a long essay or book called The Ideal of a University. So in there, he just basically talks about that. That's literally what it is about. So as I was preparing for the show, Father, I was thinking, wait a second, because we have women in universities now, but it hadn't even crossed my mind in regards to universities, how before basically the late 1800s and the early 20th century, that is that women were not admitted into universities. So I told you, Father, before before going live, I said, well, that it seems like academic life started going on a free fall after those years. So we, part of the restoration is going to be not admitting women into universities anymore.
That women's suffrage, all around the same time period.
And so I started going through doing a little bit of research, which is very easy, just on Google, basically. So I looked at Cambridge, Oxford University, the University of Mexico, Harvard, the University of Barcelona, the University of Madrid, basically the most well-known, prestigious universities, because the University of Mexico would have been one of the more prestigious than Harvard, really, at the time. And so anyway, and older, I believe. So, of course, yes, even at the University of Mexico, women used to not be admitted. Harvard, the same. Cambridge, the same. Oxford, and so on and so forth. So the admitting women into university, and so essentially also when Newman is writing about his ideal of a university, Father, he is not talking about a an environment where men and women are together in the university. It, it's really not even not even a consideration. But anyway, so I just thought I would do a little bit of research to confirm what we already knew, that feminism comes in and just ruins everything. And of course, they probably thought, Father, oh, universities are like boys' clubs, so we need to ruin them. So anyway, so chapter 6, John Senior on the final solution to liberal education. The chapter starts out: controversies in education, as in anything else, are consequences of deeper divisions in philosophy and ultimately in religion. And by the way, before we get into the chapter, Father, another thing, I texted you a bunch of stuff, but one thing that is very interesting in the ideal of an education by Newman, which I believe, it seems to me that it's an error that a lot of people have. So Newman talks about the idea of a gentleman. So it's precisely what it sounds like. Now, let's see. I'm looking here through my notes. Newman is going to make a distinction between a gentleman and a saint. And as we unravel through the crisis, Father, and learn more and more, one thing that I understood just by sort of studying a little bit Newman's ideal of a university is that it seems to me that a lot of people nowadays confuse gravely what basically Newman says: a university will not make you a saint. It should make you a gentleman. And let's see. Newman's gentleman is the person formed by liberal education into a cultivated, reasonable, self-controlled human being, someone with clear judgment, good taste, and social tact, who can engage others fairly and pleasantly. So Newman says this is what a university is meant to do, different from a saint. So Newman says a university will not make you a saint, but Father, it seems to me that a lot of people nowadays, even in the trad movement, would read that and think, yeah, that's a saint.
Yeah, because I think, I mean, a lot of people, I mean, especially in the trad movement, we love our exterior things. We love our piety. We love, I mean, walking the walk. No, but nevertheless, what's also necessary for the saint, as I think you shared, is an interior conversion, an interior life. So while manners are something that can reveal the happening of an interior conversion, self-discipline, these sorts of things, it isn't necessarily a complete and total solid evidence of sanctity. So, good manners, self-control, these are all, human virtues, natural virtues.
And Newman makes a distinction between that, and he makes a distinction between gentleman and interior conversion. But anyway, that's not necessarily the topic of the chapter explicitly, but John Senior does reference Newman a lot throughout the book, as we've been talking about through this previous five chapters. So I thought that was interesting regarding the gentleman and saint distinction, and we really should not confuse that. Anyway, so we start out: controversies in education, as in anything else, are consequences of deeper divisions in philosophy and ultimately in religion. Disputes about general and special studies, the priorities of teaching and research, or of the humanities and science, reflect the oldest, bitterest warfare in ideas, exemplified in the death of Socrates. Socrates called it the fight between philosophy and sophistry. Aristotelians called it realism versus relativism, because all questions come down at last to the assertion or denial of a reality independent of the mind, which we can know by means of the mind with certainty. Relativism is the religion of the mass media, including not only newspapers, magazines, books, radio, records, television, and film. But alas, schools, colleges, and universities as well, which have become, as it were, the seminaries of its priesthood, turning out the writers, editors, teachers, managers, and in the recent years of its establishment, this relativism has been imposed on everyone with all the inquisitorial force of a fanatical self-righteousness, which, contradicting the major articles of its own creed, such as academic freedom and freedom of religion or separation of church and state, definitively excludes the realist view, and especially its Christian expression, which has been dominant in Western civilizations since the conversion of Constantine. So this is a very long paragraph, but it's true. So If you go into a liberal arts college at a university, you are going to get atheists.
I mean, that's kind of what liberal today means nowadays. Like liberal, I mean, it comes from the Latin word meaning to become free. So even the word education, educere, to be let out. So the Israelites were let out of Egypt. They were, educere is the word that you use there. So it's a drawing out of your old self, your immature self, and drawing you in to a mature self. So you're growing into maturity. This is the root word, the etymology of the word education. So when it comes, so when we add, the adjective liberal education, we're only just emphasizing again, it's a freedom from your undisciplined, immature self, and growing into what a human being is supposed to be. And I think that's ultimately the first thing that John Senior is going to say. I mean, he lists three specific things of what a liberal education should actually look like. The first one he actually quotes St. Ignatius of Loyola, but you can't have from this concept, you can't have a true liberal education without formation in theology and philosophy. You can't. And so that's one of the things he brings up is that, well, colleges and universities today have just become trade schools. They're nothing more than trade schools. But in addition to the trade school, learning how to, learning computer science or political science or biology, nursing, whatever else, something practical to do to make money. In addition to that, it's become this seedbed, this breeding ground for the latest political movement, the latest political movements. So much so that in a lot of these campuses, of course, you have actually like, young Republicans or young whatever, young Democrats, these sorts of things, so that people are there for a trade, they're there for a skill, but then they just embed themselves in some sort of political movement. And so there is an actual real formation. I was telling somebody at my parish, because I'm teaching his classes here on Restless Heart Media, philosophy of Aristotle, and so I'm going through a lot of his works, from categories to physics, to Nicomachean ethics, and then we're going to actually de anima and then Nicomachean ethics, to try to explain what it is. Where do we get our understanding of morality, beginning with reality in the categories, and then ending in Nicomachean ethics. But this person isn't attending the class on Wednesday nights, but instead he's watching like Nick Fuentes live stream on Wednesday nights. And I'm like, okay, man, we need formation first. You need the formation, and then you can get involved in all these politics, because otherwise you're just gonna get swept up in a movement, swept up in a crowd, and not really even think for yourself or know what the truth is. So I mean, this is kind of where John Senior is building his argument, is like, without the end goal in mind, you have no idea how to even craft a curriculum.
Also, Father, making this distinction between a gentleman and a saint, it also brought to mind the idea that a lot of us may have that, oh, if you just homeschool your children, meaning provide them a liberal education growing up, that will make them into saints. Not true. Not true.
Yeah,
That
no.
Newman, I think, is helpful in that sense in distinguishing the aims of an education, which of course homeschool is very distant from what a university would be, especially traditionally, but specifically understanding the distinction between those two. And so, Father, when we say a liberal education, can you remind us what exactly do we mean when we and in traditionally, not now, but a liberal education? Remind us what it is.
I think he talks about it, and because he states like four things. Um, I mean, he has to do with the original disciplines of rhetoric, which had to do with poetry. I'm trying to look for that paragraph. You know which one I'm talking about, Alberto, don't you?
Let's see. Let's look.
Okay, the 4 degrees of knowledge. It's on page 115. He says the ancients distinguished 4 degrees of knowledge: the poetic, where truths are grasped intuitively, as when you trust another's love; the rhetorical, where we are persuaded by evidence, but without conclusive proof, admitting that we might be wrong, as when we vote for a political candidate; next, the dialectical mode, in which we conclude to one of two opposing arguments beyond a reasonable doubt, with a kind of evidence sufficient for conviction in a law court or in a laboratory testing to certify a drug for human use; and finally, the scientific mode, science in the ancient and not the modern sense, which is a dialectical and rhetorical, but science as epistemai, So epistemic, it's something that you can actually feel, touch, and experience with your senses. We reach to absolute certitude, as when we know the whole is greater than the part, the motion presupposes agency, or know obvious facts such as Cuba is an island because we sailed around it. Each of these degrees has its appropriate faculties: poetry, memorization, and imaginative play, rhetoric, precept and practice, dialectic, scholastic disputation, and laboratory experiment, science, systematic exposition. But where does class discussion come in? Well, it isn't on the list at all, and not because the ancients didn't think of it, but because they rejected it. So John Senior is actually, talking about how the seminar, it being a form of class discussion and people proposing different ideas, in a sense, it's like synodality, where everybody just arrives at a truth through discussion. This is something that very much John Senior is against. This is basically saying this is not the way the ancients would have taught.
So let's see. I'm taking us back a little bit. We're on page 115. And so essentially, John Senior ends up getting into Father. So he's speaking in his experience as a professor in university, and then gets into the reality that he's receiving universities are receiving students that are not ready whatsoever for the what it takes, and how just everything is so deficient.
I know I skipped several pages, but what page are we on now?
I just turned over to page 110.
Okay.
I wasn't in a specific sentence or anything like that. I was just so I liked the sentence in page 110. There is no choice between God and absurdity because no man can rationally choose absurdity. And then over in the paragraph immediately following that, in page 110, he says the beginning and middle of any order is determined by its end. The word curriculum comes from the Latin for running a race, and a race makes sense only at the finish line. It cannot be a race if there's no goal, if there's nowhere to reach, if there's no finish line. Education today simply has no finish line. A college or university is a collection of studies leading to several certifications in history, literature, engineering, medicine, or whatever subject, but there isn't any final cause of the institution as a whole. No principle of integration, no idea of a university in Newman's sense, no definition of the educated man, what Newman called the gentleman, as opposed to the mere scholar, critic, scientist, technician. Like the nation itself, colleges and universities are propelled by the demands of the marketplace, pushed around by ideological pressure groups, and limited by inertia. They have no definition. Yeah, I mean, true. I think any of us that have been to college or to university know this is a matter of fact. And what's very sad, Father, is that pretty much everybody comes out of university not really having reached or attained any sort of maturity while being in university as far as how to live a good life.
On the contrary,
it ruins people. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
It's you send them to university, and then instead of improving and you get a really nice finished product at the end, it corrupts.
I know parents are worried about their kids when they go to college, rather than saying, "Oh, this is going to be the hallmark, the crown jewel, their this last years of their formation before they, become truly adults in society. 4 more years of formation, and then they're going to be, these real quality people." On the contrary, they're like, "Oh no, 18 years old, college is going to destroy all the work the last 18 years of me raising my children."
I remember when being in the economics program, Father. So the professors were very consistently against. They were more on the conservative side, and so in the first classes, like an introduction that you may take as a sophomore or something like that, people would get really angry because they wanted to talk about socialism and how and blah blah. Like and Bernie Sanders was very big at the time. I want to talk about that and how that how that, and of course the aim here of economics in the modern sense is how to grow. It's just growth in terms of GDP. That's it. So they wanted to discuss how socialism is just wonderful, and then the professors would say, "No, we're not going to talk about that. Period. End of story." Like, that's, if you want to go talk about that, do it after class or something. We're not going to talk about that. And so a lot of the more challenged individuals would get mad, leave the economics program, and then go to the, what is it, the political science, to the liberal arts college, because it was insane liberal, insane, like socialist. So just throw a tantrum and leave the program because they are not teaching you. This is so dumb. The people would throw tantrums because they would not get taught what they already
I already
need.
believe.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. So yeah, so he talks. I have taught grade books myself for well over 30 years, but have found larger and larger numbers now. The overwhelming majority of freshmen coming up from the schools who cannot read at anything like the proper speed, by which I don't mean fast, but at the speed where the mental concentration is on the wit and wisdom and even something of the taste and touch of what you might call standard college level prose and poetry. What you get instead is a painful decoding of hard sentences as if you were reading Latin. The publishers, aware of this, have turned out annotated editions which look like foreign language text into copious rephrasing into the vernacular of television. Time and Newsweek, Easy Speak. We are at the point of facing page translations of standard English literature. This, I was talking to my wife a couple of days ago. Father, now we are even seeing it in young children, which is alarming to me. So our 5-year-old, soon to turn 6 years old, was with one of her distant cousins, and not in, they just met in an extracurricular, whatever. And they were going to, of course, everybody around us, everybody that we know sends their children to public school around the same age. And well, little flat cat over here is trying to have a conversation with this other girl from her same age, and I was standing behind, and I was like, my daughter is talking to this person that she sees that looks exactly like she does, and it's like talking to a chihuahua.
What do
Like,
you mean?
meaning that it's degrading to the point where little children cannot even form Princess Fat Cat. Little children cannot even form any coherent thought out loud. They cannot form nothing, like not a sentence,
Interesting.
nothing, just like a one little thought, but not connected into something that is a sentence, which by that age you should be able to do, because I'm so. And in conversations, basically what happens is that we send the children to public schools, and they're mingling with all sorts of people, definitely not trats, definitely not Catholics, and whatever. And they're going to be all children that watch all the cartoons possible, and so on and so forth. So they're talking with among fellow barbarians instead of actually growing up and assimilating into the world. They're just being tolerated, basically, instead of bringing them up. And you're bringing up a child and introducing him or her into civilization. It's the opposite. We hate the children and don't care for them, just play whatever on TV or on the tablet or whatever. We just tolerate them because it's
Mhm.
illegal to murder them, basically. So that's what I was talking about. So this problem is going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. And I remember being in university with a lot of people that didn't speak Spanish, spoke only English, but couldn't even write English.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
no coherent. Like, you get an email and be like, how do professors deal with this?
No, it is pretty bad. I mean, even go through college, peer editing essays and all that kind of stuff. It was it was very abysmal. But I also say too, regarding homeschooling and trad families, like education is so important. I understand wanting to do uh, keep your children, your very young impressionable children from the world. Totally get that. But there was one time I was offering mass at a traditional chapel, and it was two brothers. One was like 10 years old, and the other one was like 12. I think we were gonna do like a rosary or something, and there was something. It was prayers. Anyway, I had a brochure for the prayers, and I handed it to the two altar servers, and the older one told me that I need not hand his younger brother a brochure. And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And he was like, "Because he can't read. He's 10 years old, homeschooled." So there's some extremities here. Like you have to, as parents, you have to prepare them for life. You have to prepare them for life. And so this is why, I mean, of course you could shop around for the best educational program, but if at home you're not actually putting in the effort to make sure your kids can read, like that's a huge no-no. And any priest that would be in charge of such a chapel and that's seeing that this is the formation that um, the children of the chapel are receiving would have an obligation to look at the parent to be like, listen, if you guys can't handle homeschool, you have to have a different solution because sure, he might, um, I guess get into himself into as much trouble as if he was going to public school. But nevertheless, I mean, he's got to learn to read. He's got to learn to read.
Father, question. I don't know. You may not know the answer to this. I just thought about this. So we've talked about Saint Benedict a lot also in this book. So let's say that you were a brother with Saint Benedict, or you wanted to join one of the early monasteries, and you would pray the Divine Office, but there was no printing press back then. Would basically each monk have to write his own Divine Office?
More or less, I think actually the way um, Saint Benedict organized the what's now called the Breviarium Monasticum, the monastic breviary, which is different than the Roman breviary. A lot of them, because again we're dealing with darkness, candlelight, all that kind of stuff. A lot of the psalms would be actually you could memorize the offices. So it wasn't like actually before the Pius X reforms, all of the little hours were memorizable even in the Roman breviary because priests had to go walking to do sick calls, all that kind of stuff, and so being able to memorize a song, memorize the offices, helped them to do it along the way. But then Pius X changed things. So there's that. But also, I would say too, one thing that maybe we haven't brought up enough is that because of all this lack of formation, I think Alberto was it? No, it was somebody else actually who sent me an article from Complicit Clergy about why young priests are leaving the priesthood. Then you sent me a tweet by Church Pop or something about why do we have fewer religious vocations? But I mean, even traditional in traditional communities, imagine young adults, 18, 19, 20 years old, showing up to a convent or a monastery, not being able to read Latin or chant Latin or have any formation in this whatsoever. Of course, they're going to feel completely lost. They're lost, not being able to integrate within the week or a couple of days that they're doing an experience. And so they're going to say, this life isn't for me. All because they were not prepared for even just spending a few days in a monastery. And this has to come down with just being able to read and know some Latin.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And this Church Pop tweet was regarding one of the latest Pines with Aquinas show with sister. I don't remember her name. Never have heard of her, but apparently she's very famous, like in the Noble sort of world. Where she's talking about how in the she had talked to a bishop, and apparently in the 60s, this particular religious community was welcoming Father 100 young women a year. Just this one community, one in the United States, in Wisconsin or whatever. 100 new young women a year, and then after the sale in like 72, they were taking in like 4. So, and I texted you, did they become the SSPX after the 70s? Maybe a bad joke, but nonetheless, we've talked about this very consistently, that the vocations for tradition are coming from the Novus Ordo in a disproportionate manner than from the traditional families. Amy says, I taught my son to start sounding out vowels and writing them at age 2. Today he is 28 and speaks 5 languages fluently.
This is obviously very rare. The vast majority of Americans that I meet are deathly afraid of learning a second language. I just don't get it. You know what I mean?
What do you mean deathly afraid? So they avoid it all at all costs, or
At
what?
all costs. It's like it's an idea to them that they can't fathom of being able to speak a second language. You know, it's pretty incredible. I mean, of course I find that unique here to the United States. When I lived over in Italy, it was like you were considered uneducated if you spoke less than 3. You know, and that was addition to Latin and Greek that you learned in school. You know,
So you would have learned Latin, Greek, and then Italian, and then how many more did you have to know to be considered?
some English and French.
There we go.
So
And then if you can learn English and French, then Spanish and Italian, then Spanish is you can understand it, no problem.
yeah.
All right, going back to our book. Let's see, we have 69 people watching on. We are live on X, we are live on YouTube, and we want to remind everybody about the Procedamus 2026 Gala in Clearwater Beach, Florida, in benefit of the Old Roman Catholic See of Caer-Glow and of the Oblates of St. Augustine. Acquire your tickets today at procedamus.com. So let's see. Yeah, I was pretty much through page 110. Easy speak. There is at the bottom of page 111, there is no amount of reading, remedial or advanced, no amount of study of any kind that can substitute for the fact that we are a rooted species, rooted through our senses in the air, water, earth, and fire of elemental experience. And page 112, children need direct, everyday experience of fields, forests, streams, lakes, oceans, grass, and ground, so they spontaneously sing with the psalmist. Praise the Lord from the earth, ye dragons and all ye deeps, fire, hail, snow, ice, stormy winds, which fulfill his word, mountains and all hills, fruitful trees and all cedars, beasts and all cattle, serpents and feathered fowls. And so basically the remaining paragraph talks about how the television is not a substitute for these things. And even Father, even I know that I grew up in a city, in a big city, but we still had a lot of access to nature. So even if we live in cities, we usually will have access to nature not too far away from where we're at.
Yeah, it's very important for I mean, because of course imagination is rooted still in reality. You have to take real concepts, real things, and connect them together. So it's important. It's funny. Reality helps foster creativity.
In page 113, John Senior says, but even supposing there were a freshman class discovered by some miracle apt for a great book's course, still the question of finality remains. Without someone who knows what he's talking about, a study of the great books and the great ideas they record is at best an intelligent, but nonetheless desultory bantering. Learning is not for the sake of inquiry. Inquiry is for the sake of learning truth. Even the best colloquium without certitudes to guide, it is like the endless dialogue Dante describes so vividly and sadly in the limbo of the good pagans. Among those mild, luminous souls who, severed eternally from truth, forever seek what they can never find, or whom Virgil himself, one of their number, says, senza speme vivemo indicio. Without hope, we live in desire. Then some poetry.
A lot of poetry.
So
go ahead.
No, I'm just I was thinking when you were speaking, Father, about the different languages. It's like our daughter's my first language is obviously Spanish. Our daughter's first language is Spanish, but there's a little bit of a stigma. Oh, they don't speak. They have an accent in English, or this or that. But a lot of people are also, so some people get very angry, Father, some people get very angry because they wished, even though it's literally nothing that we've done. We just talk to them in Spanish. That's it. It's not like we have this very elaborate program or anything like that to just literally teach them Spanish. But people either get very angry or they are amazed. Hey, good evening, Mark Becker. Welcome to the stream, minute 35. So anyway, so yeah, when it comes to languages, people are very very interesting. I know that in the area where I grew up in Mexico, it was very common for people to speak Spanish and to speak English, but it was very very rare to meet people that would speak like Italian or French or German or things like that. So it's
You know,
very
it's also an American thing to where if you speak English with an accent, whatever accent, you're deemed as less educated than yourself. So like, I mean, I was very aware of this kind of stigma. I grew up in the Midwest in Kansas City. And if you had a strong Southern accent, you were considered some sort of hillbilly. And of course, those up from Detroit is a different kind of Midwestern accent than those in Kansas City. Of course, you have Boston. You say car keys, khakis. Water instead of water, water. Things of this nature. And so, yeah, of course, if your children have an accent speaking Spanish, they're naturally going to draw these sorts of conclusions. But this is like an American thing where if you have an accent other than my own, if you speak a language other than my own, then you're less than me.
Oh, bro, I'm going to take us all the way to bottom of page 117, Father. So if you have anything before this, then stop me. But at bottom of page 117, he says, education in the 1960s largely left the limbo of St. John's and the other great books colleges to descend by another faster road deeper into hell, to the part where there is naught that shines, which is worse, and yet it may in the long run be the better way, because things must get worse before we shall ever see the light by which to make them better. The long way out of the radical diseducation of our time will be found, I think, only by those who get to the bottom of the labyrinthine university, and they're distinguished, as Dante said, of the bottom of Inferno, through a round opening, the beatus things which heaven bears, and thence again to see the stars.
I'm surprised you skipped over the paragraph right before that one.
Why?
Especially the way you started off the show.
Oh.
Okay, so it says on page 117, one of the best immediate improvements in the whole of contemporary life, including education, would be a moratorium on chit-chat. No more essays, single or collective, no more discussions, committees, newspaper columns, talk shows, podcasts maybe, religious dialogue, conferences, and think tanks. If someone knows something, if he has authority, let him explain as much as and to whom he sees fit, and everyone will listen and shut up. Except, of course, women, who have a special prerogative. But no, especially women, because they have the highest gift for silence. The greatest contribution to the restoration of order in all human society would be the founding in every city, town, and rural region of communities of contemplative religious committed to the life of consecrated silence, so that silence would be present in our works and days like the vigilant umpire at a game, to judge and measure all our noisy accomplishments. The chief reason why sex is tearing itself to shreds and all the violent varieties of induced sterility is that very few are leading lives of consecrated fecund virginity. And the chief reason why our discussions and committees have concluded to the sterility of skepticism is that fewer still lead lives of consecrated fecund silence. Silence. I mean, as we were talking earlier today, Alberto, over text, how we're basically the church is in a crisis very similar to that in the early church, except the one thing that is different for on our sides of things is that there's far less zeal. You had people that were willing to die for the faith, but now we have trads that will wear skirts and dresses to church on Sunday, but then jeans and pants Monday through Saturday. Completely different a different lives, and in their case, a daycare or whatever else. And then, you would have after the age of martyrdom, you would have a bunch of monasteries popping up, consecrated virgin, all these sorts of things. celibacy being that which people prized and preferred. But now we have a bunch of incels, which incel is short for involuntary celibates. So you have people that want to get married, but they're like in the 30s, mid 30s, late 30s, still shopping around, still looking, rather than just dedicating your life to God. At that point, not that you should give God your second best, like your sloppy seconds or whatever, but there's people that just prefer to keep shopping until they're, I don't know, 50 years old, rather than consecrating their life to God, because apparently that there's no happiness in that, in the consecrated life. So very, very same scenario, but different circumstances. You're muted.
There we go. I unmuted myself and then I accidentally pressed the button again. So yes, as you mentioned, Father, we are in a state very similar to the early church. But what triggered, I was scrolling through our text messages, and what triggered my text was that I saw somebody, it was a woman, I think, posting over on X, Twitter, saying, "Oh, I wish that the Feast of the Immaculate Conception was a public holiday so that we could go to Mass and not work." And I saw that and I thought, no, nothing stops us from not going to work on the holy days. Let's see, Ave Maria, every citizen should contribute to the production of the primary things. And so, Father, so I'm sitting here and I'm reading these people. So I wish that this was a public holiday so that we could go to Mass. And I was thinking, well, it wasn't like a holiday in the early church, and people would still go to Mass anyway. So why do we have to expect? And this goes back again. I don't know if the person that posted this is a trad or not, but it goes back to the similar situation of we want the social reign of Christ the King to make our lives easier. So if we're in a position where we are indifferent about going to work on holidays, then why would we end up having a system where these holidays are recognized publicly anyway? Doesn't make a lot of sense, because usually, Father, people celebrate something and observe something, and then it goes into like the public or whatever. So, and then not to mention that also the idea of work on Sundays and shopping on Sundays and so on and so forth is very lost. So we're in a status of the early church, but we have none of the seal,
Unfortunately.
But yes, I just, women, they're so good at silence. They have the highest gift for silence. And I'll read again. The greatest contribution to the restoration of order in all human society would be the founding in every city, town, and rural region of communities of contemplative religious committed to a life of consecrated silence. We agree. I think that we agree, Father, and we've been talking about this on the show. But where are we going to get these women? Where are we going to get this, as John Senior says, in every city, town, and rural region of communities of contemplative religious? So where are we going to get these people from, Father?
That's a great question. I mean, there are probably some unmarried people here that not pointing any fingers, that they have the ability to make these sort of decisions, to start these sort of monasteries, start these sort of groups to consecrate their lives to God. But of course, to be honest too, I think a lot had to do with John Paul II and his theology of the body, even in trad circles, and this kind of over glorification of the state of marriage. So St. Paul placed, of course, at the top consecrated virginity, consecrated celibacy. Second order is widowhood. And then third order is marriage. Now, of course, marriage is ordered towards the sanctification of spouses and the procreation and education of children. Nevertheless, the attitude that I see a lot of people having these days is to just assume your vocation is marriage, unless you have just some sort of St. Paul conversion experience where you're just riding a horse and all of a sudden there's this blinding light and you fall from the horse. Okay, God, I guess I'll be a priest or something. when in reality you should be asking yourself what is the best way for me to love God and to grow in holiness. That should be the question. But then, of course, we also have other podcasters like, hey, get young at 18 years old, 19 years old, before these people are even properly formed, properly educated. You already want them to make lifelong decisions. I'm also against that. They have to first reach a certain age of maturity, a certain degree of maturity, um, before they decide one way or the other.
In page, going all the way to page 119, John Senior says, not to have a college at all would mean an ignorance of many things, but to have a college in which the faculty and students form a compact to leave God out is not just a privation of a large branch of knowledge. If you leave out God, the existential, actual cause of everything, you are not just in ignorance, but have committed what St. Thomas calls the intellectual sin of certain malice. If 8 of every 10 Americans believe that Christ is God, you would expect that 8 in every 10 colleges would be founded on that divine majority, whereas it is just the other way around. Even in nominally Christian institutions and obviously in the rest, the curriculum is founded on a rigorous exclusion of any certain truth, which amounts to an inquisitorial establishment of pluralism. So, yeah, that is absolutely true. And what it's unbelievable that under the pretext of freedom of religion, Father, we have the states funding these public institutions where their students are getting deprogrammed, not only to not learn the truth, but to reject it and embrace inconsistencies, embrace errors. So there, as we mentioned, they some people, even if they are actually well formed at home, they are going to the institutions and getting deprogrammed and forcing them to accept all sorts of errors. And that is what we have. And so under the pretext of freedom of religion, the states fund schools where they are working against the social order. Makes no sense.
Yep. So then John Senior goes and establishes his 3, I guess, principles upon which a liberal education should be founded upon. He says at the bottom of page 119, supposing that you have not only gotten order and a content, but a praxis, a set of things to do, not just to think, and an agenda which is no longer a matter of temperament or choice or lifestyle, but a definite course of things which must be done, in which learning and all other kinds of activity become prayer. In which learning and all other kinds of activity become prayer, a sacrifice of praise ad majorem Dei gloriam, for the greater glory of God. In the famous phrase of St. Ignatius of Loyola, who founded the best system of Christian schools and colleges in history, for which he set down this as the first principle and foundation. Man is created to praise, reverence, and serve God our Lord, and by this means to save his soul. Over on page 121, he says, second, the conversion of education means the recognition that the ultimate formality of whatever subject is studied is the mind of God, as it is revealed in created things, physical, mathematical, and ethical, and as it is imitated in things productive, so that God himself is always our only subject, which is not to deny the real distinction of the parts. And third, the structuring of learning must follow the order of nature and of the learner from sensible to imaginative to intelligible knowledge. Gymnastics, music in the wide sense, and science follow in that order and cannot be skipped, reversed, or mixed. So those three degrees of an order is what he proposes to be the solution to a liberal education, the final solution to a liberal education.
So he says, the crisis in leadership today is a national catastrophe. We are suffering under the reign of an ignorant but shrewd bureaucratic mediocrity whose sole attention is always focused on its own advancement, which makes it easy to push out of the way those whose minds are on the job to be done, those who sit up nights pondering the mysteries of physics and the human heart, and days wrestling with the restless and reluctant minds of youth. And of course, we have transgenderism, for example, being accepted into universities, and the fact that we have so many college presidents, college and university presidents are leftists, Father. But if one of them came out and said, "Hey, Jesus Christ is God, and we will behave accordingly in this university and in what we teach," he would get immediately fired.
Hmm.
Immediately, if there's a public university president that comes out and says that, he would become immediately fired, which goes to show the idiocy, Father, of believing that, oh, I'm just going to, if somebody was to say, I'm just going to infiltrate, and then I'll
One of the
become a
hard
university president and whatever. Yes, go on.
Well, one of the hard parts is precisely that our now our whole economy, our whole society is based on production, on GDP. And so it needs people with degrees that are, again, the trade schools. The universities converted into trade schools, getting a productive degree, a degree that will get you a job, turn money to produce products to sell. And so really the idea that a university is primarily formational, um, and for people to pay, if it's going to have to be a private school, but then to pay tens of thousands of dollars for this education that at the end of the day doesn't get you a return on an investment financially is difficult. And so to create some sort of system to where you're provided the same education as the university, but in a way that's actually, you can still afford another trade school, another trade degree, so that you could then support a family. It's kind of difficult. There are challenges to this.
Mark Becker's question: are there any traditional Catholic universities? Not that I know. I think, Father, are they trying to start one in St. Mary's, Kansas? I don't know, but
Well, they've had one, St. Mary's College.
yeah, that's the only one that I know of, meaning like fully 100%. I mean, 62, and SSPA. So, but yeah, it was a John Senior, page 121. It was a bad mistake. Sorry. Parents who entrusted. Yes. So as you mentioned, sorry, it is no wonder that the citizens in revolution to Marxism took the other path. If that is liberal education, they said, let's have a trade school only and stay out of ideas altogether. This is a very, I don't know if a very American way of viewing things. Oh, if we are going to disagree, then let's just not discuss anything. And yeah. John Senior says it was a bad mistake. It played into the hands of the enemy, laughing in the wings. The purpose of a university is not staying out of trouble. Error is trouble, yes, but so is truth. What we need are good, strong deans, presidents, and faculties with a Christian liberal education themselves who have the courage to go back to start again on the right and only first principle and foundation. Page 122. The university, like business and the nation, desperately needs leaders and followers with real knowledge and love of truth, gentlemen, scholars with something of the soldier in them, because it will be tough to reverse so many habits of cowardice and weakness, disguised by quantifiable appearances, so that the number of pages of printed research, regardless of quality, is rewarded with highly paid professorships, grants, sabbaticals, while good teaching is damned with faint praise and token one-shot schoolboy prizes outside the system of serious academic advancement. And that this is going to be another issue, Father, at the average university. It's really not that difficult to become like a university administrator, because the reality is that most university professors nowadays are really not even that smart.
Mm.
They are very I mean, they may be like artistically like good at their field, but when it comes to like administering something or growth or advancing a specific purpose or something that is not necessarily within their like academic field, they struggle a lot just in like social skills and so on and so forth. So then that also translates into what they are able to transmit into the students. The John Senior says the best teachers in any university rank almost without exception in the lower half of the pay scale, while the worst occupy prestigious chairs. Yeah, that's true. So, what are the chances of reform, Father, according to John Senior?
He says You can't reform the means until you know the end, and that is finally the religious question. Unless the nation, starting with neighborhoods, homes, and hearts, returns to its Christian origin and end, it will disintegrate. Restorations never start at the collapsing top, but always in the dull, low places of simple hearts, not in the roaring of the wind, but in the whistling of a gentle air. So it begins with us, guys. We have to change ourselves, change the way we act, not wait for society, um, not wait for society to get with it and then us adapt to society. But rather, we are. I mean, as usually happens, the laws follow culture. Once we change the culture by the way we live our lives, then legislation and everything else follows suit. But we have to be the ones to change, you know, counterculturally against the current. We have to swim upstream, so to speak.
And that's definitely what we are called for these days. I've known people that start out, Father, with a lot of zeal. Oh yes, homeschool this and so on and so forth, and then it's just sort of flattens out. Bill, we are reading the restoration of Christian culture. It's because with the way that my light works, if I put it closer to the camera, let's see. Oh, okay, that's working. John Seniors, the restoration of Christian culture. Mark Becker says, I'm not waiting for the church to lead. Yes, absolutely, absolutely not, because the Novus Ordo church. Okay, I'm going to, now that we're near the end. Okay, we're not supposed to talk about this, Father, but I'm going to do it. Okay, because it has something to do with this. So yesterday it was the 60th anniversary of the closing of the Second Vatican Synod. So the USCCB posted, today we mark the 60th anniversary of the closing of the Second Vatican Council. The influences of Vatican II can be seen in every aspect of the modern church. In our understanding of divine revelation, wait, what are they talking about, Father? In our understanding of divine revelation, why did that need to change after Vatican II?
Well, that's what it is. Their understanding is the development of doctrine. Their understanding has been changed. So yeah.
And this is turning into a Procedamus ad. Okay, so this is actually what it is. We'll do it that. So the USCCB post, the influences of Vatican II can be seen in every aspect of the modern church. In our understanding of divine revelation, the universal call to holiness, the sacred liturgy, religious freedom, ecumenical dialogue, the participation of the laity in the life of the church, and so much more. Find out more about the council at, and then it was a link. It may have been it's a USCCB official page, so it may be like a virus link. So I So there we go. So we are looking at this, and we are still not supporting the Procedamus Gala. I don't know what to say.
And you have
yes.
You have your opportunity to enter a raffle to win tickets. It's in the description below. You're on our YouTube. $10 gets you a ticket, and you can be able to get two free tickets to the Procedamus Gala.
And people have said we still have okay, we're 58 minutes. I can still keep talking. So people have said in the past, oh, Father Martin, I don't like that you're like out begging for money out on the internet. Yes, the Oblates of St. Augustine is a mendicant order. What does mendicant mean, Father?
Literally beggar.
So yes, Oblates of St. Augustine.com. You can also donate to the Oblates there directly. It's very, very easy. You can set up weekly donations. You can set up monthly donations. You can make a one-time gift. Really, the way that fits the best for you, you are able to do it there. So you set it up one time, and you are supporting traditional Catholicism, but not having to like going every time with a weekly or a monthly donation. Oblates of St. Augustine. .org. I said .com. It's .org. That's correct.
We have both of them. Both work.
There we go. So both will take you to the same page. It's very, very easy to donate. And really, if you think about it, even like $2 a week help. I mean, seriously, anything helps. As we know, when we're running a tight budget at home, we're pinching pennies. Everything works. So oblatesofstaugustine.org, procedamus.com. There's multiple ways for you to give. If you are concerned, so you're sitting at your Latin Mass and the basket's going around, and every time the basket's going around, you're like, oh, what is you're at the FSSP parish. What is this going for? This is probably going to go to the bishop to pay for some abuse lawsuits or something like that. When you support the Oblates of St. Augustine, you are directly supporting traditional Catholicism. 100%. You don't say and will never say the Novus Ordo, Father. The altars where you say Mass, the Novus Ordo Mass is not celebrated there. Not even in the altars, not in the church. 100% traditional Catholicism. Oblates of St. Augustine.org. It's very, very easy to give. You said it at one time and you forget about it, and you are earning the merits of being a benefactor of the Oblates of St. Augustine and of supporting 100% traditional Catholicism. So anyway, we've hit our 1 hour mark. Anything else, Father, before we go?
Yes. Next episode is going to be our last episode regarding the restoration of Christian culture. Chapter 7, the last and final chapter of John Senior's book. So to announce to you all what the next book in our series is going to be, it is going to be, drum roll please, Story of a Soul by Saint Therese of Lisieux. So you can get this from Brunioni's Press. It's kind of the third book that's most popular regarding the French school of spiritual theology. So we've done the introduction to the devout life, we've done the self-abandonment to divine providence, and here we have the Story of a Soul regarding the French school of spiritual theology. So I thought that would be pretty interesting for us to kind of top things off a little bit, and yeah. So I mean, it's a very popular book, very popular saint. So it should be fun.
Glad that you got it, Bill. Sweet, I got that one. Mark Becker says, I need to do that. Yes. Very, very easy. You go to oblatesofstaugustine.org and you set up a weekly donation and you just forget about it. And you are supporting traditional Catholicism. And of course, you're on Restless Heart Media. The purpose of Restless Heart Media is to provide spiritual content. And we will be back on Friday. Friday's our break. Friday's like our leisure time where we break out a little bit from the spiritual and we just answer any questions that may come up. Father, anything else before we go? See you all Friday. Don't forget, this Friday, we're back.
Friday Night Leisure. See you guys in the chat. God bless. Why Procedamus? I remember the day after my ordination, the morning of my first Mass, vesting in the sacristy, putting on the amice, putting on the alb, the cincture, the maniple, the stole, the vestments. I remember the 10 years that I had been preparing for this moment. Aside from the emotions and the nerves, I was aware of what offering the holy sacrifice of the Mass means for myself and for all the faithful. But additionally, given the context of the current persecution of the traditional Catholic faith in the world and in the church, I grabbed my chalice, I grabbed my biretta, looked at the crucifix, bowed, and said, Procedamus in pacem, to which the altar servers replied, In nomine Christi, Amen. I put on my biretta, and we processed out to the altar to offer the holy sacrifice of the Mass, the traditional Latin Mass, the Mass of the ages. Ascending the steps of the altar, I felt only gratitude to our Lord for having allowed me to be an instrument in preserving that which is true, good, and beautiful for future generations, for the ages to come. As long as I'm physically able, this Mass will continue to be offered. This spirit of determination, this spirit of perseverance, is that to which I would love to invite all of you to share. The first annual Procedamus Gala is organized to support the mission of the Oblates of St. Augustine and the old Roman Catholic See of Caer-Glow to preserve the traditional Latin Mass and the traditional Catholic faith for future generations. Procedamus.